Welcome to this chapter on the rebuilding of the jf017e transmission. This chapter is divided into 3 parts: teardown, subassemblies, and reassembly. In this part, you'll learn the teardown process and inspection process for this unit. My name is jf017e. I will be your host for this chapter. It's a great day to fix transmissions, so let's get started. Alrighty, so the main tools needed to rebuild the jf017e transmission is the Lock TJ1 puller, this puller here. Or sometimes you can get a three job puller on the pulley. Also, there's some aftermarket tools that are sold that is bolted around the pulley and uses the puller to pull up on the pulley to remove the chain. You have this charge pipe tube. This is nice to have, but you don't necessarily have to have it. This is so you can fill the fluid from the bottom. Personally, on this unit, there's a dipstick. You might as well just fill it through the dipstick. So that tool is not needed, in my opinion. 46 millimeter deep socket is for the primary nut, and a 40 millimeter deep secondary socket. Best place I found to get the socket so far has been actually Amazon, and you can get them a lot cheaper there than quite a few other different places. So let's get started. First we need to remove the O-ring off the input shaft. This is for lockup, of course. And then you want to remove the range switch over here on top, the linkage arm, and speed sensors, those kind of things, remove on the outside of the unit. This core that we're tearing down here is an all-wheel drive unit out of a 2014 Nissan Pathfinder. The tag for it was 3WX3D, and it's called the RA0F10E transmission. So this is an all-wheel drive pan here. You can tell this one sticks out a little bit deeper on the bottom. There's a portion that sticks out. Here's an all-wheel drive pan on the right. Here's a longer tube on the filter. This is a two-wheel drive filter here in the middle of the screen. And it has a flat bottom pan with a rectangle pickup tube. Go ahead and remove all the pan bolts and the metal pan gasket. The next thing we're going to do is we want to remove the 14 millimeter nut, the linkage arm. Pull that out, and then go ahead and remove your filter bolts here. 3 stars here. Remove the 2 more bolts on this bracket. Remove those bolts, and then all the bolts that have a 7 on them usually are the ones for removing the valve body. So right here, labeled A on all these bolts. Those are the bolts that we need to remove to get the valve body off. Also, make sure you remove the electrical plug too. It's right here. After you remove the electrical plug and the valve body is removed, you can remove the main case connector and lower half the wiring. So this wire clip is on the outside of the transmission right here. Pull that clip out. Put it back onto your connector here while you're washing everything up. And then get this connector and harness out of the way. End of this harness right here is a temp sensor. So one thing I like to do on disassembly is do some inspections to in case we come up with something inside that we're not sure what it is. Let's say like the forward clutches were burnt or something like that. Sure would have been nice to know if there's a leak in the system or why the forward clutch is burned up. So I like to do the air test on the teardown. So I like to air test the forward and reverse clutches with roughly 40 pounds of regulated air. Then you have your primary and your secondary pulley. go ahead and air check those also. It's not going to be like a clutch pack sound. It's not going to make a big thunk or thud like when a clutch is applied or anything like that. You may get the bolt to move, you may not. The main thing is just how much blow by and how much pressure are they holding. If you have a huge leak and it's not doing much, most likely you have seal damage and you're going to have to go inside the pulleys no matter what. So, but at least you'll know, hey, there's a leak inside on the main pulley. Let's do a little close inspection, make sure we find the issue. Now, if you didn't already just remove the input sealing ring, here's a reminder: you need to remove that O-ring, and then we need to remove all the 14mm bill housing bolts. Tip it back on the bill housing, and you'll want to remove the 410mm bolts around this filter housing. You'll see this housing has a seal underneath it, then the filter cartridge, and then the rubber seal goes towards the main case goes in first. If you find a little round longer than a modulator pin rolling around, that's probably your linkage pin. It holds the shaft from sliding up and down. Make sure you pull that out and put it in your parts bin or put it on the side of your toolbox, something like that, to keep it separated, and to remind you to also to put it in when you get going back together with it. So here what we did is basically pulled the main front case off. Just hit it in the hammer with a couple spots upward, and then we're going to go ahead and inspect this trans a little better. So on this front housing, go ahead and remove this 10mm Allen and blow solvent and clean this brass tube out right here. Go ahead and knock your front seal out, and then you want to check your bearing races for pitting or any score marks, that kind of thing. Take this dust shield off. I guess it's not a dust shield, it's actually like an oil slinger, for oil control. Go ahead and take that off and make sure you clean the back side of it. See the clutch material and the black gunk on the back of this shield. So make sure you take the shields off and clean behind them too. There's a lot of traps where debris is going to hang out. Go ahead and pull the differential out and the transfer gear out. You want to check for pitting on any of the gear faces, and also the planets, or not the planets, but the bearings. You want to make sure there's no pitting and the bearings are in good shape too. Most bearings now are in stock at most transmission supply warehouses, so bearings and parts shouldn't be an issue with this unit. There's another heat shield over here too. I'll have to pull that out a little bit later. But now we're going to get to the pump. We're going to take the pump section part of it. So here's a snap ring that you need to spread here on that lower pump gear. Go ahead and spread the snap ring and lift up on it and kind of rotate a little bit and wiggle it around, and that whole driven sprocket will come out. This here's the back side of the driven sprocket. The bearing goes towards the back first, and then here's the front view of the sprocket. Want to watch and make sure that you look for an ID mark to see if it's facing up or down. So on this unit, let's see, here's the ID mark here right towards the bottom of the screen. That's the dark ID mark. So in this one, ID mark is going up. We have seen ID marks on these chains go up or down, like they just toss them in whatever direction they want, and it doesn't really matter to them. But on this one, the ID mark went down. Make sure you check yours and see what it is on teardown. This drive gear is a little bit confusing just because the way it's shaped, and it's kind of hard to tell by just looking at the gear which direction things go in. So the easiest way of telling, in my opinion, is this wide land right here from the outside of the gear to the sprocket itself, that measurement. versus this side right here, the small side to the tooth. So we have quite a bit of difference here on those two. So this wide section goes to the transmission. It goes downward. This narrow surface area where the thrust washer you would think rides, it rides right on the case, but that right there, the narrow one faces up. Flip it over, the wide side here where the thrust surface is faces down. Here we got the diff out. We're going to pull the oil baffle here out. We're going to pull this bracket off right here that holds the pump in and helps support the pump. This little shield here. And then we're going to pull all the support bolts out also. So we got the support bolts out. Nothing special here. Make sure the stator's in good shape. Make sure the bushing's tight. Ringland grooves aren't worn or pitted. Then on the case side, go ahead and knock this axle seal out. And inspect the gears and bearings at this time. And we talked about the linkage pin. Make sure you take that out before you put it in the cleaner, or you will lose it in the cleaner. And then take the linkage wheelie bar out also. So now listen up to here. One important thing to say: thrust washers. This first thrust washer you get to underneath the stator, it is selective. So make sure you mark it, keep it set aside. Whatever you do, write it down. Note what the selective pressure plate is. So let's go ahead and just basically grab the input shaft and pull this out. This torrenting bearing here is selective and it's not widely available. So make sure you measure that in play and get it correct. And then on the other side, after pulling that main assembly out, the shiny side is going to be up on the thrust bearing facing you. So we'll want to inspect the area where the speed sensor rides off of here, ringland grooves, front bushing in the converter. On this hub, you'll want to check the gear face and backlash, or backside of the tooth, and make sure that the clutches is not gouging into these metal teeth here. Here we have another bearing that looks exactly the same as the other one. The sunny side is facing to the hub. So both sunny sides of these bearings are facing towards this hub. On the planet, check where the teeth ride for the clutches. Make sure the pins are nice and tight. Make sure the gears don't rock sideways or anything like that. And of course for pitting on the planet and the little thrust washers on the planet itself. Go ahead and remove the pump. There's a short bolt coming from the outside. And then we have 3 Allen bolts coming in. And so next thing we do is we flip the transmission over, remove all the rear bolts out of it, and then we pull the primary and secondary pulley up out at once. The following chapters will have subassembly, teardown, and reassembly for each component. Make sure the selective thrust bearing stays in the correct location under the support. Take the pulleys apart every time. Do not go by the look of the chain and pulleys. Make sure you check the fit of the seal rings and the pulleys itself, and make sure you check all the bearings and fittings. When working on the valve body, this is kind of my rule of thumb, and this is not me as a normal builder. I do not pull every valve out of every valve. To me, it's not worth doing, and can cause more problems than it does good. But on the Jatco CVT units, I expect everyone to pull the valve body completely apart to wash it one by one. I know it takes some time, but you will cut your CB rate or your no-go rate down probably 3/4% or so. This will conclude our teardown of the jf017e transmission. We want to thank you for participating in our virtual training solutions powered by ATRA. Until next time, let's keep fixing transmissions together.